health from the inside out, also called How's Your Endothelium Today? What the heck is that and why does it matter? We will get to all that. This is a super important topic because we know that heart attacks and strokes are the leading killer of both men and women in North America. And there's lots we can do to prevent it. So first, an introduction, a few words about myself. I am naturopathic Dr. Kate Rayom. I am a graduate and former faculty member of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. And I am the author of this best-selling book, Vitamin K2 and the Calcium Paradox, How a Little Known Vitamin Could Save Your Life. And I have presented in person at Goodness Me on many an occasion and wish I could see all of your faces because I'm sure there would be some that I would recognize since we go back so far at Goodness Me together. And in addition to a number of other things, I am a busy working mom and an educator, which is what brings me here tonight to talk about this important and potentially life-saving topic. I am also an inactive member of the, in good standing of the College of Naturopaths of Ontario, which means I'm not actively currently seeing patients, sorry. And as we go along tonight, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat area. And I will do my best to address as many of those as I can at the end of the presentation because it can be hard to switch back and forth between chat and questions in this kind of forum, but I'll do my best to get to everyone's questions. And I do believe that a recording of the webinar will be sent to everyone that is registered. Okay, so let us talk about, first of all, let's talk about a little bit of definitions. When we talk about heart health, or actually specifically when we use the term heart disease, this is a very general term, a broad term. Cardiovascular disease or heart disease are very broad terms that can refer to all kinds of different conditions and ailments that affect any aspect of our heart muscle itself or our vascular system, our arteries, our veins, including the ones in our head. So strokes and heart attacks are often taken together as similar manifestations of, or manifestations of a similar problem. But so there's lots of things we could be talking about. Specifically tonight, I will focus and hone in primarily on what's called coronary artery disease. So this is atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries that feed the heart. And the reason why I'm focusing on that is because when there's a problem with those, that is what leads to heart attacks, which is what leads to death or serious illness and impairment. But everything I talk about will be beneficial for the entire cardiovascular system, including the blood vessels in the brain. But I won't be focusing on, say, heart failure or varicose veins or other different types of conditions that can affect the body, but just this main killer. Again, men and women, this is the leading cause of death for everyone in North America and really in the Western world. And there's lots we can do to prevent it if we understand what we're doing. So I want to take a poll just to get you involved. You can check out the little poll area. The first poll is a simple true or false poll. High cholesterol causes heart attacks, or cholesterol causes heart attacks. So you can plug in your answer there, true or false, what you think. We have often talked about arteries as being like pipes that become clogged, for example, with cholesterol. And what's your take on that? What's your feeling on that? So I'll let you, I'll give it a minute to weigh in on the poll because I know there's lots of people online and it may take a moment. Look, we're looking at about 2/3 true, 1/3 false, maybe coming up to 50-50. Looks like true is going to win out. Yeah, we're looking at about 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 say true, 1/3 says false. And what we have been told for a very long time is that, and the whole focus around heart health when it comes to cardiovascular health has been around cholesterol, right? Get blood tests to measure cholesterol. If your cholesterol is high, take medications to lower your cholesterol. For a while, there was even talk of eating a low cholesterol diet, but we don't hear much about that anymore because we know that if you try to cut cholesterol out of your diet, your body will just make more to compensate. All right, so it looks like the poll is about 60-40 true to false. And maybe my title of Move Over Cholesterol was a bit of a hint or a giveaway. But the fact is that 50% of all people who have heart attacks have normal cholesterol levels at the time of their heart attack and no history of ever having had high cholesterol, which means if you go to the doctor and you get your cholesterol measured and it's normal, you may think, whew, I don't have any risk for heart attack. But in fact, half of the people who have heart attacks, in fact, never had high cholesterol. That wasn't an issue for them. So it's possible to have a heart attack without having had high cholesterol. So that's one thing. What if you do have high cholesterol? So the point is that even if you don't have high cholesterol, if you have any of the other risk factors for heart disease, and we can talk about those, or say, for example, family history, smoking, diabetes, lack of exercise, so a sedentary lifestyle, for example, these kinds of things, but your cholesterol levels are normal, that doesn't mean you have no risk for having a heart attack. But what if you do have high cholesterol? When should you be concerned? I know that there are maybe people taking statin medications. We can talk about that shortly. How good a predictor, if you do have high cholesterol, we know you can have a heart attack without having high cholesterol, but if you do have high cholesterol, how good a predictor is that of having a heart attack? Well, it turns out that cholesterol levels aren't great predictors of having a heart attack. The risk of having a heart attack for people with elevated cholesterol is pretty good if you happen to be in your 20s. If you're in your 20s or 30s, and especially for men, and quite high cholesterol, there is a risk associated with having a heart attack. But as you get older, the risk associated and the predictive value of high cholesterol and heart attack starts to go away. And as a matter of fact, over the age of 60, there is no association between cholesterol levels and heart attack risk. And if anything, there seems to be a slight inverse association for people over the age of 60, which means that slightly elevated cholesterol seems to be associated with a somewhat lower risk of having a heart attack, as well as developing dementia. So that's not something you hear often, and there's a lot of information on here I don't expect you to read, but I just wanted to show you, this is in the British Medical Journal, a paper showing either no association or this slightly inverse protective effect of cholesterol for people over the age of 60. And so if you are over the age of 60 and you don't have any other risk factors and you have not ever had a heart attack, then I would think long and hard before taking medications to lower your cholesterol, because that may not necessarily be doing you any favors. However, I know there are lots of people taking a statin medication and are wondering about that. So we will talk about that shortly. But first, let's say if cholesterol doesn't cause heart attacks and strokes, then what does? Well, we know that cholesterol is not a great predictor of whether or not you're going to have a heart attack, but arterial calcification is. In other words, calcium, which should be in our bones and teeth, can end up in soft tissues like arteries, where it causes hardening of the arteries. Everybody's heard the term hardening of the arteries, and it is a literal stiffening in some areas to a blockage in other areas. And that hardening is caused by deposition of calcium. And you can see this on certain types of scans. Coronary artery calcium scans measures the amount of calcium in those coronary arteries. And the more calcium that is in there, the higher your risk of having a heart attack. The amount of calcium in your arteries is an excellent predictor, quite accurate, of your risk of having a heart attack within 5 years of getting that test. By the way, this is not a test that's readily available in Canada. It is quite easily available in the States. And when the border was open, I would recommend people could just drive down to Buffalo and get this kind of test for a few $100 US. Can't do that right now, but should you ever be interested, Buffalo MRI, for example, gets it if you're coming from Hamilton. There's other places. So this arterial calcification is important. And so knowing this and knowing the things that I've spoken about, we can develop much more functional goals when we're talking about heart health. We can, in addition to or instead of just lowering cholesterol, we can help prevent and reverse accumulation of calcium in the arteries, for example. We can decrease inflammation. We can make sure that the cholesterol we do have, you know how we call good and bad cholesterol, that the cholesterol we do have stays good, and I'll talk later about how to do that. And so these are some more important goals, and those are the kinds of goals that I'll touch on tonight. So whether or not your cholesterol is high or low, whether or not you're taking cholesterol-lowering medication, whether or not you know if you have calcium in your arteries, for example. We can take steps to improve our cardiovascular health by following this kind of a path that I'll lay out for you. But I do want to talk about statin medications briefly, because I know that people are concerned about them. Oh, by the way, when we talk about good and bad cholesterol, because I want to make sure to talk and cover this before I talk about cholesterol-lowering medications. We have said HDL and LDL. HDL is the good cholesterol, LDL is the bad cholesterol. But even the so-called bad cholesterol isn't bad, and it is not associated with an increased risk of heart attack until it becomes oxidized. When it becomes oxidized, then it does have the potential to stick in areas that it shouldn't, cause problems, especially if there's an area of the blood vessel that has been damaged, which can happen, and I'll explain how that can happen. It can go in there to maybe plug up the damage, and then the calcium comes to try to keep that stuck on there like a plaster. So that can cause problems. But we can prevent our cholesterol from becoming oxidized, meaning even the LDL stays on it, working for us and good guy on our side, with antioxidants, and we'll talk about that. All right, so I keep saying I'm going to talk about statin medications. Let's do a poll before I do that. Let's say, if you want to register, if you're taking a statin medication, A, if you're not taking a statin medication, B, or if your doctor has mentioned the possibility of taking a statin medication and you're thinking about it, researching about it, not sure if you should or shouldn't. I do often get people mentioning that, so that's why I want to give that as an option. Okay, we have some taking, some not taking, and some thinking about it. Give that a minute there. Okay, so looks like we have roughly 20% of people taking on here tonight, 20 to 25. It looks like it's wiggling, 25% taking a statin, around 50 not taking a statin, and around another quarter of attendees who have been told maybe take a statin, but they're not sure about it. So hopefully this will provide interesting and useful and helpful information for you. So that's what breaks it down. 1/4 taking a statin, half not, and 1/4 considering it. So let's look at statin medications. They do lower cholesterol. There's no doubt about that. But is that a helpful thing? Well, I mentioned already that we know that for people over the age of 60, simply having high cholesterol is not associated with an elevated risk of having a heart attack or stroke. And statin medications for people who are otherwise at low risk for cardiovascular disease. In other words, if you don't have an extensive family history, you're not very much overweight, you live a moderately active lifestyle, in other words, you're not completely sedentary, you don't have diabetes, these are all risk factors for cardiovascular disease. If you don't have those, you're considered to be low risk for cardiovascular disease, regardless really of your cholesterol levels. And if you have never had a heart attack, in other words, we're talking about something called primary prevention, then statin medications do not show any statistically significant mortality benefit. In other words, they have not been shown to save lives. They have not been shown to prevent fatal heart attacks. The amount of heart attacks that you see in people taking and not taking them with these same risk factors is just about equal. So, and unfortunately, on the flip side, 1 in 21 people who will take these medications will experience some kind of muscle damage associated with them. And if you are taking statins and experiencing muscle pain, especially leg pain, but it can be back pain as well, then do speak to your doctor about that. As well as about 1 in 200 people taking these medications will develop blood sugar problems and diabetes problems. So if you have diabetes and you're on a statin, do speak to your doctor about whether that is a good thing to continue. And so it's not a massive improvement or a massive benefit when you are talking about statin medications. So just to keep that in mind, it's still something you need to speak to about your doctor. Certainly if you're already taking one, I'm not advising anybody to stop any prescribed medication. But if you aren't sure about them, then this is good information. By the way, you can find this at something called the NNT, which means the numbers needed to treat. And this is a way of evaluating any medication, any treatment, any intervention in terms of its risk and its benefits. So how helpful is it really? And you can find that online at thennt.com. Okay, so if, by the way, you are taking a statin medication, hopefully you are aware of the fact that the nutrient coenzyme Q10 is really important. It's important for heart health for everyone, but specifically for people who are taking a cholesterol-lowering medication. You should be taking CoQ10 alongside with that, because as a side effect of the mechanism by which these medicines work, the statin medicines work, they prevent your body from producing its natural coenzyme Q10. CoQ10 is a nutrient that, first of all, works as an antioxidant. So it's really important in protecting us against free radicals. That's important for overall health, brain health, cardiovascular health. That will protect your cholesterol from becoming oxidized. And CoQ10 is also used for energy production. It is used within the mitochondria. Those are like the batteries of our cells. We have those in all of the cells of our body, but of course our heart constantly beating, it needs a ton of energy, so it needs CoQ10. And if CoQ10 is lacking, then heart muscle function can slow down. And so absolutely, if you're on a statin medication, ubiquinol, for example, so this is a form of CoQ10 that we find in the bloodstream, highly absorbable and effective and active. 100 milligrams of those per day is a good idea for people on statins. Even if you're not on statins, but you are concerned about cardiovascular health, this is a nutrient that's challenging to get in through diet. Organ meats are some of the best sources, but that's not something we eat a lot of. Heart in particular, if you can find it, is a good source of CoQ10, but that's not something we eat a lot of. So CoQ10 is an important nutrient, essential for anybody on statins, but important even if you have any concerns around heart health. Okay, so what differentiates our blood vessels from simply pipes that can become clogged? Because this is something that you hear people say, or we used to think that blood vessels would simply become clogged up like a clogged pipe. But in fact, blood vessels are not simply tubes or pipes that can get clogged. They are dynamic, and they are dynamic due to a special lining that they have. All the blood vessels in our body have a lining called the endothelium. It's one cell layer thick, and it does all kinds of different things. It releases compounds that can cause dilation, and it has an ability to heal itself and control the environment in a number of different ways. And when there's a problem with the endothelium, when the endothelium becomes harmed and it's not able to repair itself the way it should, then you can get a little area where, yes, plaque can develop, maybe a little oxidized cholesterol can get in, maybe some calcium on top of that, and that can make a problem, and which, if that detaches, can cause a clot or a blockage of an artery leading to a heart attack or stroke, for example. And so keeping this endothelium healthy, in addition to making sure our cholesterol doesn't oxidize, making sure that our inflammation levels are low, this is a really key part of our cardiovascular health. And when there's a problem in our arteries, you can even ask why, or look at why the endothelium didn't do its job to protect us. Not necessarily to blame the endothelium, but if anything to say, what does the endothelium need to be healthy? And if you think about this lining all throughout every single vessel in our body, taken together, it is an amazing system. So here is a quote which I just thought was funny, because the authors in this International Journal of Biological Science, in reviewing and giving an overview of the endothelium and its role in human diseases, did not mince words when they said, changes in the endothelium play a central role in the creation of a broad spectrum of the most dreadful of human diseases, including vascular disease, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, insulin resistance, severe viral infections. So the endothelium is really an organ unto itself, this lining of all of our blood vessels. And when there's problems in any given area, that is associated and can be the underlying causative factor of stroke, of dementia, of heart attacks, angina, heart failure, peripheral artery disease, all kinds of things. And so we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the endothelium, how to take care of it, because keeping this healthy is a really important part of your heart health. And along the way, we'll touch on a number of different things we can do. And specifically, being a naturopathic doctor, I'm going to focus in on nutrients, nutrition and nutrients to help with that. Of course, as I've already mentioned, there are obvious things like being physically active, not smoking, and keeping your blood sugar stable and healthy, which will help with cardiovascular health for lots of reasons. But we're going to focus in on nutrition to support this endothelium and a few other things along the way. Okay, so how do we take care of our endothelium? Well, first of all, let's talk about how do we harm our endothelium. I've already mentioned a few of these things, but just to be clear. So studies have shown there are certain things that we do or don't do that are specifically harmful to the endothelium. So being sedentary, not ever exercising, is harmful to the lining of our blood vessels in a way that promotes inflammation in the body and promotes cardiovascular disease. Smoking, it's a no-brainer, but just in case you needed to be reminded, the free radicals generated by smoking is a problem. It's not the nicotine itself, but all the other toxins that are a problem. Stress is one that will, over time, in chronic levels, can be very harmful for us. Free radicals, so that can be exposure of these unpaired electrons, these damaging electrons through toxins in our environment. Stress will increase these. Inflammation. Inflammation is damaging to the endothelium. Yes, it causes pain in our joints, but it's an underlying factor to cardiovascular disease because of the effect that it has on the lining of our blood vessels. High sugar intake, same thing. Lack of quality sleep, and that's something we can talk about. Really, we need a whole other webinar to talk about sleep, and I'm happy to do that. High intake of omega-6 essential fatty acids. So where would you find these in the diet? They are overrepresented in the North American diet. Seed oils, things like canola oil, sunflower oil, these are often high in omega-6s. They are even more problematic when they're cooked at high temperatures, so used for frying, for example, because then they're quite damaged. Those are pro-inflammatory. They cause inflammation, they damage the endothelium, and they're absolutely associated with all kinds of problems, including cardiovascular disease. Trans fats, we all know, are not good. The body can't process them. And a lack of key nutrients. And so the endothelium, being an organ, it requires certain specific nutrients to be fed, to be nourished, to do its job, just like any other organ. So we'll focus on some of those. Okay, the flip side. So now the good news. That was the bad news. Now we're going to focus on the good news. So how to take care of your endothelium. First of all, exercise. Obviously everything I'm going to say is the opposite of what I just said, but exercise actually creates a little bit of inflammation in the body initially, but then there's this wave, this nice rebound effect that's quite anti-inflammatory, and it helps to lower and maintain healthy blood pressure, which is really important for cardiovascular health. Relaxation and laughter also are important for good endothelial health. I'll show a study about that later. And intake of antioxidants, we'll go and mention a few of those. I've already mentioned coenzyme Q10. Omega-3 essential fatty acids. More omega-3s are associated with better endothelial function, lower risk of cardiovascular disease and dementia, you name it. They're anti-inflammatory. They're good for all kinds of things, and they are underrepresented in our diet. They balance out the omega-6s. And the Mediterranean diet has been shown to be helpful for endothelial health, cardiovascular health. We know it's famous for that. And so I'm going to talk about a few of the tips and maybe secrets of the Mediterranean diet that we didn't think of. In other words, it's not just the red wine and olive oil that may be good for us when it comes to that diet. Okay, so specifically when we're going to focus tonight on nutrients that help to heal the endothelium, and then, by the way, along the way, they are also helping to maintain healthy blood pressure, fight free radicals, make sure your cholesterol is not oxidized, prevent inflammation. So these are some of the ones, and make sure calcium isn't building up in the wrong parts of the body where it shouldn't. So we're going to focus on some that either you may not have heard of, or you may have heard but aren't sure what they are, or of course the most important ones: vitamin K2, magnesium, and quercetin. I'll also touch on a few other popular ones. I've already talked about coenzyme Q10. I'll touch on briefly on vitamin C and curcumin as well. Okay, so first let's start with vitamin K2, which is the topic of my book here. And vitamin K2 is a nutrient that takes calcium and helps to guide it in the body so that calcium goes into the bones and teeth where you want it to, and it does not end up in, and even can be removed from, soft tissues like arteries. So vitamin K2, by the way, does this by acting on the endothelial cells and activating their ability to clear out calcium. They do have the ability to do that. They make little proteins that will help to grab onto calcium and clear it away where it shouldn't be, but those don't work, and the endothelium can't do that until vitamin K2 arrives on the scene to make that happen. And so you've heard, we've already talked about hardening of the arteries. So that can take the form of a buildup in one small area. It can also take the form of just general stiffening of all of the arteries. And studies have shown, for example, in postmenopausal women who have stiffening of the arteries, so their arteries are less flexible. And this can be measured. It's an important risk factor for developing a heart disease. And taking vitamin K2 has been shown to reverse arterial stiffening, restore arterial flexibility and softness, which then lowers the risk for heart attack. So you can reverse that hardening of the arteries. So this is important nutrient. Where do we find vitamin K2 in the diet? Well, first of all, grass-fed animal foods, which we know is challenging to get to begin with. But of course, in Canada in the wintertime, unless you're flying butter in from New Zealand, grass-fed animal foods is a tough thing to get in the wintertime here in Canada. But certainly if you can get it in the summertime, eggs that are from chickens that are out on a pasture like a green field, not just cage-free open door policy, but literally in the field. Those are egg yolks, because this is a fat-soluble vitamin, is rich in vitamin K2. We know those are tough to get, as I said, in the winter and in general. So there's another source that's more readily available year-round, which is certain types of fermented foods. So some, but not all bacteria can make vitamin K2, specifically certain types of cheeses, brie, Gouda, Jarlsberg, Gruyere. These are cheeses that are high in vitamin K2. And it doesn't matter if the milk is grass-fed, that's not important. The bacteria will make this, and it'll be a source of vitamin K2 quite consistently year-round. So that's something to keep in your diet. And if you want a really heart-healthy snack, then you can't beat brie cheese and a glass of red wine. So vitamin K2, as I mentioned, it helps with arterial calcifications, which are an important risk factor and predictor of heart attack. And even when your cholesterol levels are normal, there can be calcium-laden plaque that lurks in the arteries. Vitamin K2 has been shown to reduce arterial calcifications and restore arterial flexibility, as I already mentioned. Vitamin D helps us absorb calcium, but has no control over where that calcium goes. That's the job of vitamin K2. So if you're taking vitamin D, vitamin K2 is very important. And by the way, everybody should be taking vitamin D in Canada in the wintertime. If you're taking a calcium supplement, you need to make sure that you've got vitamin K2 on hand to make sure your calcium is getting into the right places. One other food, just in case there are any people following plant-based diets, I mentioned lots of cheeses and grass-fed animal foods, but the single highest food in vitamin K2 that we know of is in fact a plant-based food. It is something called natto, N-A-T-T-O, shown right here. And this is a traditional Japanese soy food made from fermented soy beans. It is eaten as a breakfast food in some areas of Japan. It's an excellent source of vitamin K2. And if you were even just eating this a couple times a week, you'd have all the vitamin K2 you would need in your diet. You can find this in Asian grocery stores. It's all, there's no English on the label, so it's hard to find, but usually in little styrofoam containers packed up in the freezer. You just thaw it and put it on rice. So I do encourage people to try to find it and try it. Not everybody loves the taste and or texture, which is pretty much as you can see from the picture here, but I do encourage everyone to try it because it's a great source of vitamin K2. If you find that you can't find natto or don't love natto, and as much as you love cheese, even if you love it as much as I do, you can only eat so much of it, and you're concerned about your heart health, you're taking vitamin D, or you're taking calcium, or you're concerned about bone health even, then a vitamin K2 supplement is a good way to go. So vitamin K2 is available on its own, as you can see here on the left, or in combination with vitamin D, since the two work together. A lot of people already have vitamin D and are taking a vitamin D, so you can just buy vitamin K2. They complement one another. Or for convenience, K and D, this is, by the way, K2 and vitamin D3, which really, we should put that on the label. You can take that together. So for general health maintenance, then 100 to 120 micrograms per day, in other words, roughly, depending on which one you're taking, it's very close in the dose, 1 capsule per day. The clinical trials on bone health have been using roughly twice that, around 200 micrograms per day is what's being used in the bone health studies. And the heart health studies are using approximately the equivalent of 300 micrograms per day. And to give a comparison, if you were eating a serving of natto per day, you would be getting 300 micrograms of vitamin K2 per day. It is very safe. It has no drug interactions except for people taking warfarin. If you're on a warfarin blood thinner, then long story short, vitamin K2 can counteract how that medicine works, and then the dose has to be adjusted, and it's better to avoid it. There are people who take them together when they're very closely monitored by their specialist. But for most people, I would say don't bother with that. Now, any other kind of blood thinner, Effient, Pradaxa, Xarelto, aspirin, for example, Plavix, those do not interfere. It's just the warfarin blood thinners. And so this is the idea behind the vitamin K2, is the main thing it does is keep calcium in the right place in the body. Okay, so that's vitamin K2, and that's the part of the equation we're talking about keeping calcium in its place. There's another nutrient that does all kinds of things and also helps to keep calcium in its place, plays a big role in that, and that is magnesium. Magnesium does so much. We could probably also do a whole webinar on magnesium. It is involved in over 300 different reactions, enzymatic reactions in the body at least. And specifically when it comes to cardiovascular health, magnesium and calcium, as you've probably heard, they are partners, you can say. They balance one another. Magnesium deficiency is common, and when magnesium levels are low, calcium can build up and get into the wrong places. Magnesium helps to keep calcium in check. It complements vitamin K2 in its roles and actions in the body of keeping calcium in the right place. Magnesium is really important for supporting healthy blood pressure. And keeping healthy blood pressure is one of the most important things you can do for your heart health. Always take your blood pressure medications as prescribed continuously, work with your doctor, have your blood pressure monitored. Blood pressure is very important. And magnesium helps to support healthy blood pressure. It is an anti-stress mineral. We deplete it more from our bodies when we're under stress. We need it more. We need to take in more when we're under stress. And not surprisingly, it has been shown to help support healthy endothelial function. So keeping that endothelium, its ability to dilate and contract appropriately, keeping it clear of calcium, does all kinds of things. I could go on and on about magnesium. I love magnesium. Low magnesium, so magnesium deficiency, promotes endothelial cell dysfunction, disease and dysfunction in the endothelium if you're low in magnesium, which is very common because magnesium has become depleted in our soils, so it is more difficult to get in through our foods than it used to be. That makes magnesium supplements very handy. The recommended daily intake of magnesium, according to Health Canada, which is usually, by the way, these recommended daily intakes are sort of the minimum that we need for good health, for adults is roughly 400 milligrams per day. So that is not nothing. It is not a small amount, and it won't happen on its own. Food sources of magnesium include green leafy vegetables, but again, soil levels are declining. So green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds do contain magnesium, but nuts and seeds also contain something called phytates or phytic acid, which can bind minerals and prevent you from absorbing them unless the nuts and seeds are soaked and or sprouted before you eat them. Dark chocolate, that's very good news, is a great source of usually very easily absorbable magnesium. But again, you can only take so much dark chocolate. So a magnesium supplement is really indispensable when it comes to getting enough magnesium. And I personally take one myself every night before bed. And when you look at, I'm showing a wide variety of different supplements here from, a few different labels. And, I'm missing my MagSense that I normally have in this picture. And, there's a few different types of magnesium that you'll find in the market. Magnesium citrate, inexpensive, effective, cheap and cheerful, I like to say. That's a good one. But not everybody, it doesn't agree with everyone. Some people with sensitive stomachs, they feel like that's hard on their stomach. Magnesium bisglycinate is an option for people who have sensitive stomachs. So there's a few options here of magnesium glycinate in powders or capsules, for example. This is a kid's one that my son takes and I end up taking. But what I want to focus in on here is Medi-C Plus with magnesium ascorbate. So this is a buffered form of vitamin C with magnesium. And this is helpful for, first of all, providing a source of magnesium, which can be, as we said, challenging to get in through the diet, as well as vitamin C and lysine in this formula are supportive of collagen formation. And we know that collagen tends to decrease with age, and this results in things like stiff joints and wrinkles. But even more importantly, collagen is a structural component throughout our body of all kinds of things, including the blood vessels in our cardiovascular system. So if those blood vessels are weakening or there's any thinning areas because collagen is being depleted, that's an area that can more easily become damaged, and then you get a bit of a clogging effect. And so maintaining the health of our collagen in our body is an important aspect of maintaining overall cardiovascular health. So here are a few nutrients that help with that. In addition to the magnesium, specifically the nutrients that help with collagen support are vitamin C and lysine. So this is one reason why I'm highlighting the Medi-C as a nice source of magnesium with some added bonuses for your collagen. I wanted to do actually a poll because then we're talking about magnesium. Let's do a poll question on that. Who takes a magnesium supplement? There's three options here: regularly, occasionally, or no, never, or rarely. Curious about that. While people are weighing in with their poll answer, and yes, I would expect that the Goodness Me crowd is taking magnesium. That's good to see. Magnesium also has few drug interactions for people on with certain types of kidney disease that have to be very careful about their mineral intake, need to work with the doctor on that. If you're already taking blood pressure lowering medications, then you need to go slow with magnesium because magnesium also has a blood pressure lowering effect. So you want to make sure that you aren't lowering your blood pressure too much or feeling lightheaded. So you want to maybe start with a small amount and continue. One of the most common questions I get asked is, how much magnesium do you need to take? Well, as I mentioned before, the recommended daily intake for Health Canada from all sources is 400 milligrams. So from all sources throughout the day, You want to be aiming for at least 400. And beyond that, it depends on the individual, your specific tolerance and requirements. For example, if you tend to have muscle cramps at night, magnesium is nice to take some extra to help prevent that. Okay, so magnesium supplements, 50% or over 54% are regular takers, a little bit under 20% are occasional takers, and 27% are no, never, or rarely. Okay, really interesting. Very curious about that. All right, moving right along to fish oil. I mentioned the importance of omega-3 when it comes to heart health. And this is also important for brain health and skin health. It's a great anti-inflammatory. Omega-3 essential fatty acids lower triglycerides, which are a marker or a lipid that is a concern when you talk about heart health. They help to reduce blood viscosity. So what we say is thinning of the blood, help to prevent the likelihood of blood clots. Omega-3s help to lower inflammation, and not surprisingly, they help to improve endothelial function. So where do we get omega-3s from our diet? Omega-3 essential fatty acids come from deep cold water fish is one source: salmon, mackerels, anchovies, sardines, herring, those kind of fatty fish. However, especially the larger ones, things like salmon, for example, do contain environmental contaminants. They're not something that can be eaten every day, even wild-caught ones. Because of their environmental contaminants, you don't want to be eating those fish more than about twice a week. The smaller ones, things like little ones like sardines and anchovies, you can have those more often, but the larger ones, twice a week. And then there are plant-based omega-3s from things like flax seeds, for example, flaxseed oil. However, the body does have to convert those then to the long-chain form that you need to use, and your ability to convert them depends on the individual. And so this again, oh, and by the way, grass-fed animal foods is a good source of omega-3s when you can find them. But this is where fish oil supplements come in. A fish oil supplement has an advantage over eating fish because the fish oil supplements have been processed in a way that remove contaminants. So this is why I'm showing this little symbol here that says Isura, I-S-U-R-A. It's really important. There's a huge difference on the market in terms of purity and potency of fish oil. And so this Isura symbol, for example, ensures that the fish oils have been purified and then tested above and beyond even the Health Canada requirements to make sure they are free of the contaminants that you would find in fish. So I have seen all kinds of interesting things in terms of fish oil, ones from the dollar store. My mom showed me something the other day that I couldn't believe she was taking, that she'd gotten very inexpensively at a department store. And it had almost no active ingredient in it. So I'm not sure what she was paying for, but it didn't have almost any EPA and DHA. These are the types of omega-3s that you want when we talk about omega-3s. These are the ones that have been shown to have the heart health and brain health benefits. Taking a good quality omega-3 supplement can reduce the risk of death from cardiovascular disease by up to 62%, studies have shown, as well as 47% reduction in the risk of developing dementia. Huge, important factors in our health. But purity and potency are key, and there are a lot of products on the market that aren't great. Shopping at Goodness Me is a way to ensure you're getting a good quality product, because they wouldn't list the not good ones. But here's the kind of thing that you're looking for. Maximum triple strength RX omega-3 that you can get. I would call this a one a day, because you can get just shy of 1,000 milligrams of the combined EPA DHA. That would be a goal. To be honest, in the wintertime, I would typically double that. You need more in the winter, especially if you're having any kind of dry skin, itchy skin. We need more omega-3s in the winter just because of the dry environment. So even 2. This particular one I'm showing has vitamin D in it. That's not necessary. That was just a picture that I took. But the soft gels have a special coating within them, so that doesn't burp back, because we know that can happen with fish oil. It is tested by iSure to make sure it's free of the contaminants you find in fish. And most importantly, it's potent. It has the omega-3s that you want to be taking. Okay. Okay, we've got a couple more things to talk about before we wrap up and look at questions. So two more nutrients, actually. So this is the second to last nutrient that I want to talk about, which is quercetin. Quercetin is a nutrient that you find, it's a vitamin-like compound. It was originally thought to be a vitamin. It was discovered by the same person and at the same time as vitamin C. And the person who, the Hungarian researcher who won a Nobel Prize for that discovery. And quercetin was later deemed not a vitamin, but a vitamin-like molecule that you'll find in small amounts in a number of plant-based foods. Capers happen to be the highest known food for quercetin. Red onions have some. A lot of green leafy vegetables, sorrel, dock, parsley, these kinds of things are high in quercetin. And in fact, quercetin is thought to be one of the key beneficial components of the Mediterranean diet. We talk about the Mediterranean diet being high in olive oil and red wine and all these good things, but in fact, it may be the quercetin that is protecting blood vessels and the reason why the Mediterranean diet is in fact so heart healthy. So quercetin, it belongs to a category of nutrients called flavonoids. They have been shown to act on the endothelium to help reduce blood pressure. They are antioxidants. They help to improve the functioning and the responsiveness of the endothelium. Reducing platelet activity means helping to prevent blood clots from forming. And they have anti-inflammatory effects. So all of these are very protective of our vascular system in general. And so these are really quite heart healthy. So I do recommend for people to enjoy a wide range of those foods that I noticed, lots of these plant-based foods, onions, green leafy vegetables, herbs, capers, for example. And if you're concerned about cardiovascular health, you might want to consider a quercetin supplement. It is deemed to be a free radical fighter and a blood vessel protectant. And quercetin is one of those molecules that you will absorb some on its own in a plain form, for example. But if you add a couple of ingredients or change it a little bit in a way that enhances absorption, you get more out of it. So quercetin lipomicelle matrix is a combination of quercetin and a few other natural ingredients that cause the quercetin to form tiny little droplets. When it hits the stomach and it mixes with the moisture in your system, it forms these tiny little droplets called micelles, and those are very quickly and easily absorbed into the body. So 10 times higher absorption of the quercetin. And this is as I mentioned, it's a blood vessel protectant is how it's referred to. Okay, last but not least, I'll mention curcumin, because I know that everybody's heard about curcumin, and curcumin does live up to the hype when it comes to just about everything, including heart health. Specifically, curcumin is an excellent antioxidant, and it protects cholesterol from becoming oxidized. So even your so-called bad or potentially bad LDL cholesterol, as long as it's not being oxidized, it's not causing you any harm. And curcumin is also an excellent anti-inflammatory, which is really important for cardiovascular health. But all of this only happens if curcumin is adequately absorbed. And so curcumin, of course, is the active ingredient, or you could say medicinal ingredient, from the herb turmeric. Here's turmeric here in its whole form. Looks a lot like ginger, but it's more bright orange. You can find it in a powdered form as well. But just sprinkling a little turmeric on your food, or even having a turmeric latte, or grating it into your smoothies, or juicing it, or whatever, studies have shown that you simply do not absorb curcumin doing that. Your blood levels stay very low. So it's important to get the benefits of curcumin and the kinds of things that we're seeing in clinical trials to have an advanced absorption form. So the curcumin rich here achieves this by taking curcumin and grinding it down to a tiny, tiny particle, which is then highly absorbed. And there are more published clinical trials behind the Theracurmin brand of curcumin than any other curcumin on the market. Unfortunately, the way the labeling is done, the way Health Canada requires labels to be produced, it can be very difficult for shoppers to be doing an apples-to-apples comparison of curcumin products. And so you can see one curcumin product that seems to have, 1,000 milligrams of curcumin in it, and it seems cheap. But a double-strength curcumin rich, for example, if you look on the side, has 60 milligrams, and maybe it's more expensive. And this, however, when you look at an unprocessed regular curcumin, studies have shown that you can have up to 12,000 milligrams of that, or 12 grams, literally heaping spoonfuls, and blood levels don't change compared to, for example, a single double-strength Theracurmin, which gets the blood levels right up and keeps them there. So this is a big difference when you're looking at the benefits of curcumin, whether you're taking it for pain relief, inflammation, or heart health. That's really important. And I know that everybody has heard that the key to absorbing curcumin is black pepper, but unfortunately that was based on a small study done back in the 90s when researchers started to realize that people just weren't absorbing curcumin. And the clinical trials weren't working the way they expected because of that, and thought, how can we make curcumin more absorbable? So they took a bunch of people, gave them some curcumin, and showed that blood levels were just barely detectable. And they gave them curcumin and black pepper and showed that blood levels went from barely detectable to just a little bit more than barely detectable. And they said, hey, this is a 400% increase in the absorption of curcumin. And that seemed like a big deal. But 400% times nothing is still almost nothing. And so black pepper doesn't make that big a difference. It was a big deal back in the 90s, but we now realize that it doesn't make that big a difference. But yet somehow this myth has persisted based on these little studies. So that's, if you've heard that, and if you really feel strongly about it, you can grind some pepper onto your food when you have your Theracurmin, for example. But studies have shown that it doesn't make a huge difference. Okay. And so those are the nutrients that I wanted to cover in terms of many different aspects of heart health beyond cholesterol. And I want to leave us, before I get to questions, on this note. A University of Maryland Medical Center study shows that laughter helps our blood vessels function better, specifically by causing the endothelium to relax, dilate, and expand in order to increase blood flow. And so laughter really is the best medicine, potentially, and specifically, it has been shown to be heart healthy and helpful for your endothelium. And thanks, everyone, for your attention and taking steps to improve your own health. Stay well in the next little bit, stay healthy, and take care. See you again next time.